up through this athletic department is that I've been able to lean on people like you who have been not just in this athletic department, but in this community and starting sports. And I've said it kind of out in the community before, like, this was my first head coaching job.
Mine too.
And to have the people around us to help kind of build us up and to help us navigate this thing has been tremendous. So it's been a lot of fun.
Starting an NCAA program from scratch is not something many people have experience with, but on South Carolina's campus, we happen to know a couple folks who do. On this episode of Gamecock Talk, Major and Moritz Moritz will tell you building it from the ground up for a decade or two is the ride of a lifetime.
Well, Moritz, how did you get started in volleyball, or even beach volleyball, or did you start in volleyball?
Started in volleyball. Fortunately, grew up in Southern California, where at my high school, the big sports were not like the perennial kind of sports, football, basketball. I mean, we had a decent basketball team, but we had like really good water polo and really good swimming, and our volleyball teams were really good. So that's kind of the way we projected, and I was kind of fortunate. I didn't have a background in volleyball, but this is going to date it a little bit, but my typing teacher was the volleyball coach, and he was actually, prior to that, was a basketball coach. They needed a volleyball coach, and then he ended up becoming this, for 20 years was the volleyball coach there, and he just kind of tried to gather who he saw was athletic at some point, and he had this kind of hotbed of volleyball players coming up. So I started probably around the 8th grade, 9th grade playing volleyball. Came up through his program, and the other really cool thing about it was more on the indoor side. But the cool thing about my high school at that point was we were a mile from the beach, and we were a couple of miles from one of the the hotbeds of beach volleyball. So I didn't spend a ton of time early on playing beach volleyball, but it was one of those kind of cross-training opportunities for us. And then as I got more into it, it definitely developed into something where there was an affinity for volleyball, and here are kind of these other avenues to continue to play the game that we love. So, it's kind of neat to have Coach Enstedt, the typing teacher, kind of discover us and kind of project us forward into it. So kind of neat. It was fun. It was a lot of fun back in those days. I mean, high level kids that played and went on to play at UCLA and Southern Cal and different places like that. I wasn't fortunate enough to do that, but definitely the right area, right place at the right time. So how about you? How'd you get your start?
Oh gosh, well, I think sometimes, and I don't think it carries over with the guys as much as it does with the girls, but I think a lot of girls are just born horse crazy, and that was me. I rode for the first time by myself when I was 3 years old. I'm from Columbia, so there was actually a ranch out in Blythewood that we rode at called the JJ Ranch. And it was wonderful. We had a wonderful time, and they would take us on overnights, and we'd take the wagons out and things. It was kind of like old-timey Western stuff, and it was great. And unfortunately, the owners of this ranch were killed in an airplane. Wow. Actually, it happened in Columbia. They crashed the airplane on I-26, and sadly, they both passed away. And so we were kind of left with nowhere to go. And my uncle had a farm out in Blythewood as well. And I rode a little bit out there, and I rode Western to start with. And then there was a program in Columbia that was owned, there was a farm out on Bluff Road called Belgrove, and it was owned by someone named Sinclair Manning, and his partner in it was someone named Betty Beltzer, and she had a riding school. And so the deal was you would go and be in the riding school, And after 3 years, you would graduate from her teaching to go into Sinkler's program where, everybody had a lot of fun. And so we went there. My mother had to beg Ms. Belzer to let me in. She heard about it kind of late in the game, and Betty took basically mostly 10. You had to be 10 to get in. Every once in a while, she'd take a 9-year-old, but you had to be 10. And I was 10, and my mother went nuts, going, you got to let her in, you got to let her in. So she did, which was great. And we had a riding class, we called it, of 13 kids, and I'm still friends with several of them. Still, a lot of them still are in Columbia. But from there, Sinkler had sold his farm, and Betty bought another farm called Hickory Top Farm, which is out on the Sumter Highway. It is still in business today. And rode out there for 4 years and just kept riding. Now, there wasn't a lot of the horses in that day were not, and it still is the case, but it's a little more popular, but it wasn't ever affiliated with schools, that it was its own entity. But, we felt like our little group was our own little school that we had. So anyway, from there, went to Sweetbriar College for a couple of years, and then transferred back to South Carolina and competed in a collegiate form called the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association there. But I also was doing a lot of competitions, just outside competitions. So I've kind of dabbled in everything with the horses. I've ridden Western, I've ridden hunt seat, and we call it jumping seat now. I've fox hunted. I've, done a lot of things that kind of gave me a really broad background. And so that's kind of how I got started. How did you end up here?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Loaded question.
Loaded question. Well, and I think obviously in the sport of beach volleyball, not as much in volleyball anymore, but in the sport of beach volleyball, a lot of the thinking circulates around the hotbeds are going to be California, Florida. Ironically, Texas is actually becoming quite big. But just coaching in general, after I ended up going to college at Colorado State. My mom, basically the day I graduated high school, my mom was tired of Los Angeles. So she left and she moved to Denver, and then ended up moving into Northern Colorado.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, it was
That's
fantastic.
Nice move.
A great move. But and then it was like, well, go to school. And I was at Santa Monica Community College for a little bit. And she said, well, I can get you in-state tuition here if you move over here and come to school here. I said, okay, done. So I moved to Colorado, went to Colorado State, was still young enough at that point where, pursuing beach volleyball or indoor volleyball, anything beyond, club or at the collegiate level, there wasn't really anything there.
Yeah.
Not for someone my size necessarily. Thought I could jump pretty good. I was relatively athletic, but when you're playing against people that are 6'4", 6'6", 6'8", deck's a little bit stacked against you. But fancied myself a pretty decent player. Managed to get on with the club team there, and at one point, the coach for the indoor team, the women's team, came down and said we needed a couple practice players. Got into the gym with them, was a practice player for several years, ended up kind of becoming, going up the ranks with them. And ultimately, I didn't know I wanted to get into coaching. I wanted to play. At that point, kind of bouncing back and forth between Colorado and California, surfing and beach and volleyball, and then kind of evolving into beach volleyball even a little bit more. But the pathway at one point was, I got sat down by the head coach, and he said, what do you want to do with your life? I was a couple credits shy. The dean, at this point, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth quite a bit. It took me a while to get through my undergrad. But at one point, between the head coach at Colorado State asking what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and the dean of the College of Liberal Arts at the time at Colorado State calling me and said, Moritz, do you actually want to graduate college? Or do you just want to keep taking classes? we figured out a pathway, and then that ultimately got me kind of involved in kind of the higher level coaching aspect of it. Really the ultimate catalyst at one point, and I tell my team this story quite a bit because I'm still thinking, I had a background in philosophy, I had a background in psychology and English and those types of things. I was not really thinking coaching. I thought it was, something great to be a part of. I got to, exercise, play at a pretty high level. I've never been blocked and defended and played as hard by that group of college women athletes. I mean, they talked more trash and they did. I mean, it was so much fun, but it was super competitive the entire time. And but even at that point, didn't really consider what am I doing beyond college? And I actually had gone back to California, hadn't graduated at the time, had gone back to California and was just kind of working idle jobs, surfing, playing beach volleyball at that time, having fun, and got a call from the head coach. And one of our assistant coaches at the time, it's kind of crazy, this is a while ago, kind of gets you emotional, but one of our coaches had gotten into a car wreck on Father's Day.
Oh.
And lost his wife. Fortunately, his two boys were healthy. They were okay. He ended up having pretty significant brain injuries. So he's in the hospital. It's getting up to, and it's getting up to the time that preseason's starting, kind of July-ish. And the head coach calls me and says, hey, we are expecting Andy to make a full recovery, not knowing anything at that point. He's been in this accident. We're expecting him to make a full recovery. At that point, I'd been in the program as a volunteer, as a practice player for several years. So Tom calls me and says, hey, I need you to come back. I just need you to fill in for this time. Andy's going to come back. As soon as he comes back, you go do whatever you want to do. So kind of crazy. I moved back, I moved back from California back to Colorado State. I'm in there as an interim assistant coach. And that's kind of when everything starts falling into place. And it's kind of crazy. I tell the players this all the time, like my career and where I am now is kind of based on and predicated on tragedy.
Yeah, yeah.
And everything positive that has happened to me in volleyball and in coaching from that point on is because of this instance, which is something that ultimately I'm super grateful for. But knowing Andy for as long as I have, his late wife, it's one of those situations where it couldn't have happened to one of the best people on the planet.
Yeah.
But everything that I am grateful for nowadays is because of that situation.
Yeah. It's interesting how things kind of happen for a reason.
Yeah.
And as sad as it is, it's it was turned into a great opportunity for you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah, it also kind of stems back to the people that have your back. The people that are mentors, the people that support you throughout this entire transition. After that, got to work at the University of Idaho for 5 years, and then the indoor position here opened up when there's a head coaching transition. So I moved over after 5 years in Idaho. I was the indoor assistant here for 2 seasons, and then Coach Tanner makes a transition from athletic director, from baseball coach to athletic director, and adds beach volleyball. And again, kind of crazy, but right time, right place.
The rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I did. For me, I knew I was going to do horses for the rest of my life. So and I knew I was going to teach and train and do all that from the get-go. And my parents were ones that said, if we don't care what you do in college, but you will go to college and you will graduate. And so when I got back to Carolina, I had no, it was like, you can't major in horses at the University of South Carolina. So what are you going to major in? And I kind of fooled around a little bit and then ended up, frankly, and it's not easy anymore, but tried to find the funnest, easiest thing for me that I could major in, and it ended up being broadcast journalism. So I loved it. I loved doing it. I knew I would never get into it, but I loved it while I was there. So I did that, and I started teaching actually when I was still in college. And a good friend of mine, Marguerite Ferguson, had a farm called Wood Creek Farm that was actually the property where Wood Creek is now, the Wood Creek subdivision. Her family owned the whole thing. And anyway, there was a beautiful farm there. And so she offered me a job there, and that's where I started. And I love to teach. And I wasn't ever interested in teaching in school, although, at one point you kind of go, okay, what if I get hurt and I can't do this anymore? I can't ride anymore, whatever. So I did go back to Carolina and got a degree in education. But I never got hurt to where I couldn't teach anymore. So I kind of first started there with Marguerite, and then I taught out at back to Hickory Top Farm for several years. And then I got to where I became independent, self-employed. And it's all good and fine, but being self-employed, I was driving all over the state teaching. I had a group in Florence and a group in Irmo and a group, here and there and everywhere. And I loved it, but it was one of those things where if it rains, you don't get paid. So for me, it was a very hard job, in that it was very satisfying personally, but didn't make any money. But it was fine. I mean, I loved it, and I could have done it for the rest of my life. But the interesting thing with here is, having graduated from USC and being from Columbia, I mean, I'm obviously a Gamecock fanatic. I've been a fanatic since I was born. My grandfather played football here, so I have a long history here at Carolina. So there was a coach before me, and she was part of the club team, and they elevated the club team basically to the varsity or the NCAA emerging sport team. And things did not work out with her after a year or so. And so the athletics department, and Mike McGee was the athletic director at the time, and he loved horses too. That's one of the reasons why equestrian is here. I know everybody's like, why do you have horses at the University of South Carolina? But he was a big horse fanatic, and he was like, we're going to do this. And I think everybody probably in the athletic department thought he was crazy, but Mike ran. He was a one-man show in the athletic. There was no group or senior staff or anything. He was it. And so when it came about that they were looking for a new coach, but the old coach also owned the facility where they rode, and so they were so it was, we have to have a coach and a facility. And so they put the word out. I think they also gathered a group of horse people from Columbia to help with the search. And this friend of mine where I taught out in Irmo, place that was called Irish Oaks, I don't know what it's called, something Creekside now. But anyway, Bernadette, her name was Halpin at the time, and she owned the farm. I was teaching out there, and I'll never forget, we were at a party, and somebody who worked at USC was talking to us and was like, God, have you heard about the equestrian program? And we were like, no. And I mean, yes, but no. And she said, so Bernadette and I just kind of looked at each other, and I'm telling you, it was just a wild hair. We were just like, well, let's try it. Let's see if we can get it. It was all about, let's see if we can get it. And so we put a package together, and there were several other places that applied, and through I don't know what divine intervention maybe that we ended up getting the whole thing, and it frankly it's totally changed my life. It's very different from being self-employed, where you're just outside all day long teaching and you send bills out at the end of the month. I mean, now it's, as you know, at least half the time is spent in the office doing lots of paperwork and stuff. So I do think it was very exciting then. And then at one point, when Eric Hyman came on as athletic director, we had been leasing a farm out in Blythewood that was called One Wood Farm, which is where we are now. And we were leasing it from the owners, Scott and Katie Peterson. And we had a meeting at one point, and Eric was like, "Why?" They wanted to sell it all along, but we were a little nervous about buying our own facility. But I'll still remember we were in a meeting, and Eric was like, "Why haven't we bought this place?" And Katie and Scott were like, "We don't know. Why haven't you bought it?" And so he said, "Let's buy it." And it was all meant, it's just like you, it was all meant to happen. Scott and Katie, we leased the place from them. They were there for 3 years. They showed us all the ins and outs of the whole farm of, you got to grease the doors at this point. You got to watch it when it rains for this. So we learned everything there was to know about the farm. And then when they left, they got out of the horse business. They're back in it now, but they got out of the horse business so that they gave us everything. They got the tractor and the buckets, and we didn't have to buy much. I mean, we did, but we didn't have to buy much of anything. So it was a great move to move out there. So that's been a lot of fun. I do think, being that our program was started, I mean, this is my 26th year, hard to believe. But when we started, we were on a shoestring budget, which now you and I still sometimes go, we're on the shoestring budget. But back then, I remember the athletes, if we gave them a T-shirt, they would jump out of their skin. They were so excited. And now we get stuff like this, which is fantastic. So the evolution of women's sports and the evolution of emerging sports has really been phenomenal in the last 26 years, frankly. And I know for you, the emerging sport part of beach volleyball, it went right up the chain. We're still kind of sitting in emerging sport status, but we're also trying to figure out other ways to get to championship status. But how is that changing from, I don't know how long it took.
We were the fastest emerging sport to get to NCAA
I believe it.
championships. And I think South Carolina added in year 3. And I think in the first year, and every year for maybe the first 5 years or so, they were adding 15 to 20 programs a year. And we're currently, we're a little over 12 or 13 years complete.
It's been that long.
Yeah, I mean, for South Carolina, we're going into our 11th year, but for beach volleyball at the collegiate level, I mean, it's a little bit further on, and I mean, we're at 90 plus teams right now, and it's still growing. We still have programs adding, but lots of growing pains. Lots to figure out, lots to learn. But I think, that transition of Coach Tanner from baseball to AD, coupled with the success that we were having, the United States was having on the Olympic level with Carrie and Misty, and just everything being showcased around volleyball, and obviously there's needs. I mean, there's needs at a program level to get to where we need to make sure that we have, we're closer to the ratios that we need to be. And to be able to jump in and to see this sport just blow up the way, and to be a part of it is
really
huge.
exciting.
It was huge. And it's still, I mean, to this day, it's something that's super exciting because, I mean, just over the summer, ran into a coach, brand new coach, like just a couple years out of college, but starting a new program. And like, how exciting is it for new programs to be added somewhere and new coaches to be coming up through this and basically having to build something from the ground
Yeah.
up, which, a lot of coaches, we're just familiar with, like, we'll grow up, be an assistant somewhere, then you'll become a head coach at, an established program somewhere, and you're kind of in this routine, like you know what you've been doing. But when you build something,
Yeah.
you think you have a plan, you think you have, you've thought of everything, and then you get slapped in the face. You didn't think of this, you didn't
Yeah.
think of this, and there's just this, enormous. I think to this day we're still like, didn't think of that. We can keep fine tuning that piece of it.
Yeah.
And we're 11 years, or we're going on 11 years now, and still fine tuning those things.
Yeah.
And not even just only our program, but just as a sport in general. It's how can we tweak and adjust things to make this the best product that we can overall, but really also make it the best experience for our student athletes that we possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's so important for the kids to have a good experience. And I don't, do you have kids that go like we have? We're always, well, not always, but lots of times we're struggling with the hot shots and turning professional. Do you have a lot out of high school, or do they go on to college and then?
Most of them will go into college. The framework for professional beach volleyball players is significantly different. You could have, they're basically open tournaments.
Yeah.
Now, you may not be playing at the highest level, but on any given day, you could have two high school kids decide, hey, we're going to go play this qualifier. And if they're good enough and they win in that qualifier, then they can get into a main draw.
Yeah.
That's actually something that we are starting to see now. Younger and younger, these kids are able to pair up and get into, they're as athletic as a lot of these other people, and working themselves up the chain before they even get to it. Now, it's also a little bit different because, who knows what the percentage is, but who's really going to make a living
Right.
off of being a pro athlete in beach volleyball?
Yeah.
There's a handful. So the kid coming out of high school right now is definitely still projecting, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to pursue the professional component of it, but I for sure know I need to have, something to fall back onto.
Yeah.
So, the college degree and the college experience is tremendous in that way. And I think shaping
I agree.
the pro piece of it as well.
I have a hard time sometimes when we'll have, not necessarily the ones that tell us from the get-go that they're turning professional, and so don't even bother recruiting me because I'm going to turn professional, but the ones that start here and then, they might be here a couple of years and then they go, you know what, I think I'm going to turn professional. And as I'm sure you know, and I know with horses, it is a really difficult business. And when you look at somebody that is, I just, when I look like it's myself, if my parents hadn't said you going to college, I wouldn't have gone.
Right.
And I think I appreciate them again every day. I wouldn't have had this job had I not gone to college. So, but it almost, it doesn't break my heart, but it really is sad when I see kids that or maybe have gotten a couple of years in and then go, yeah, I think I'm going to turn professional. And you're just like, turn professional, but finish college.
Yes.
And that's what I tell them all whenever something like that happens is I think there's been one that we had come through that left early, and I told her to go because she was hitting her stride, and needed to turn professional and was going to Europe and competing, wanted to compete for the United States and things like that. And she was one that I said, off you go. You don't need to be here. But as a whole, yes, it's about the experience, but it's also about finishing, going to college, finishing school, and major in something. And I laugh about my major in broadcast journalism, and Dean Bierbauer, who's not at the school anymore, but I remember him telling me, but you do use your broadcast journalism degree, and he's right. I do,
Right.
And I've learned through the years of being a coach that I do utilize it, and as the time progresses, you get more and more comfortable, doing stuff like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the one of the things that we benefit greatly, I think, in our sport, and maybe this is a product of obviously who we're recruiting, but also really kind of the pool of people that we're recruiting from is the type of kids that we're looking at, their aspirations, the things that they're looking to accomplish, whether it's professionally, competitively, all of these things. I mean, it's the full gamut, the full range of majors that they pursue and how they want to continue to pursue it. But I mean, I've over the last 10 years, I've heard of majors because of things that our kids are involved in that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
and that
That's
blow
true.
my mind.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really kind of cool to see how even that aspect of it and how competitive those athletes are, not just in getting better at beach volleyball, you know, or getting better at riding horses, right? But really just like everything that they're trying to accomplish all the time too. So you said, you know, there was a program here for a year.
Right.
And it didn't work out for that coach, didn't work out for that facility.
Right.
And then, you know, serendipitously, you know, here's this opportunity that arises for you. You know, what was that like moving into that and kind of how you started it and grew it from that point?
I think that's a great question. We to start, I think one of the things, and it still happens now, is you'll get people that say, "Oh, I didn't know we had an equestrian program. Oh, I didn't know equestrian was an NCAA sport." You know, and they end up asking a lot of questions that, you know, oh, how do you get the horses where they're going? And it's like, okay, the horses don't travel. And I think that with that, I think the reaction wasn't, I think it was very positive within the community, the ones that knew about it. I think that certainly within the horse community, it was huge. And I mean huge across like the United States that, oh my goodness, like Fresno State and Fresno State was the first program that had equestrian that added it. And then South Carolina was next. And Mike McGee would go, we were the first major Division I. And I'm just like, no, you were just the second. Just say you were second. But he didn't like saying that. But anyway, I think that drew a lot of attention with the horse world. And I think the reputation in the horse community has grown exponentially. I mean, it used to be pulling teeth to get kids to come to school, to ride in college, because they were like, oh, you know, oh, that's beneath me, you know, kind of thing. And then as the years have progressed and we have gotten top-notch kids in our best kids in the country in our equestrian programs, then everyone else they strive to get into equestrian programs in college. So I do think it's grown tremendously as far as the horse world is concerned. In our community, we actually, I love to call, you know, shout out to Blythewood, where our facility is. That community has been wonderful supporting us since we've moved there. I think when we were at Irish Oaks before that, it was a little more difficult to find us where we were, and it was so early in we didn't do a lot of advertising for competitions and things like that. So, but the biggest issue we had was within the university student body. And I'll still remember one time we were being recognized at a basketball game, and I remember looking up in the bleachers and these guys were up there going like this, you know, and it was just like, come on, you got to be kidding me. And and the other thing we get, and we still do, is, oh, anybody can ride a horse. You know, it's like, oh yeah, and anybody can hit a volleyball too.
Right.
It's easy.
Yeah.
You know, anybody can throw a football. So sure. And so I think that through the years, it has changed. It has evolved to where we have become much more accepted within the community of the University of South Carolina. And I think that that people start to learn about the sport a little bit more and understand it, and our student athletes get involved with other student athletes and the sororities and their school and their classes, and encourage people to come out and watch. So it has been a long evolution, and I still get people that say I didn't know y'all had an equestrian team. I'm sure you get the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it's the same too. I feel like we'll go out on the field at a football game for some academic recognition.
Yeah.
And no doubt I'm looking into the stands, and people are looking at each other like, we have a beach volleyball team?
Yeah.
Like, how long
exactly.
have we had one of them?
Exactly.
I mean, obviously, anytime you have reach to somebody, to a group in the community when it's 80,000 people in a stadium,
it's great.
It's tremendous.
Yeah.
Being up on the big screen and everything like that. I think it's very similar. Anytime in the sport of beach volleyball, smaller sport, that kind of thing, anytime you get a Pac-12 school or a SEC school, ACC school to add something, then it raises eyebrows.
Absolutely.
So it raises eyebrows. So, that kind of transition on it is, we of course still have our challenges, just like any other school, but we also have some advantages and we have some opportunities. But I think continuing to raise awareness. I mean, to this day, not a lot of people are thinking about beach volleyball in South Carolina, particularly in Columbia, South Carolina. You're hour and a half, 2 hours from the beach. True, and to boot, because you drive down PCH in California, there's courts on courts on courts.
Oh, yeah.
You could do that in Florida in certain places. There's courts on courts. In Columbia, there's our courts and maybe a handful of others. And even if you go down the beach, there might be some in Myrtle, there might be some in Charleston. But that's it. So the exposure of the sport in general isn't huge in this region. Now it's growing, and partially because of our existence and the different schools that are adding programs in and around. So from a beach volleyball perspective, there's growth and there's a lot of excitement around the growth of it, how that continues. And I think gradually, same boat, I think it's making sure that our student athletes really foster that growth internally as well. And I mean, I'll tell you, since I've been here, 2 years or 2 seasons with indoor, and then even transitioning, we kind of prided ourselves on, hey, let's go see some of these other sports. Let's go support softball. Let's go support equestrian. I mean, the first time we showed up as a team to one of your events, we're sitting there and we're quiet because we're like, we don't want to scare the horses or anything. And then they're like yelling and screaming, and your rider and the horses are hitting the brakes, and it's like phenomenal. And like, okay, what can we do? And it was awesome.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't have known had we not gone out there.
Yeah.
And really checked it out.
I remember. I mean, I remember that it's so fun when a team comes out, and our student athletes are like, oh my gosh, beach volleyball. We've had women's basketballers come out and watched, and and we've had a few football players that are dating girls on the team or whatever come out, and so it has been that piece of it is rewarding, I think, to be able to go to the other sports. I think that helps the camaraderie within the whole athletic department as far as the student athletes are concerned. Well, what about what is your most favorite memory so far of?
Wow.
I know it's a hard one.
Well, and I mean there's a lot. I only have 10 years to kind of draw on, but every year, I think the neat thing for us is still where we are with our program. We're still able to hit firsts. Mm-hmm. There are certain things that we haven't accomplished yet. There are certain teams we haven't gotten over the hump and beaten yet. There are, so there's still kind of these fun things that hey, let's target that a little bit more. And let's, we're continuing to work and develop towards that. I think it would be hard to ignore as some of my favorite moments, like the first time we made it into the tournament. And I think part of it, because of the anticipation that built around it, I think we were kind of doing math at one point, and I was like, we might have like a 1 in 3 chance. And, you know, their resume is better than ours here, but ours is better than theirs here. Maybe so.
It sounds very
Oh,
familiar.
yeah, right. And and we're in like my little, you know, we're at the time I'm living in this little townhome. Got the team and got a bunch of, you know, the family and everybody's in there. We're all crouched around, and you know, the interviewers on the show are talking about the number 1 seed Southern Cal and all of this stuff, and they're, you know, hyping and building it up, and then very like casually just like, and they're playing South Carolina, and we're like,
Oh wow, oh wow.
what do you say? Oh my gosh, and then everybody
that's
just loses
fabulous.
it. And so it's like that kind of moment where you just, there it is.
Yeah.
You know, you just hit it. And you know, that's one of those things. I think that's maybe something that on a grander scale for the entire team to be able to kind of gravitate around that moment, bring the entire team down to Gulf Shores at that time and really do it. But also to be able to hit, you know, to go from our first year learning everything that we were learning and not winning very much to how do we continue to build and incrementally, like the first time, you know, you beat a team, or the first time you get to the tournament, or the first time you kind of do those things. You know, you go back and you talk to athletes, and it's like they're not necessarily going to remember that we went, you know, this is our record, and
Right.
we remember all of these different things. They're going to hit a couple points. Hey, you know, like last year, I know talking to some of our graduates from this last year, like I'm always going to remember this tournament that we played at Georgia State last year. It was raining sideways. It was like 28 degrees. I was miserable. I had all 3 of my jerseys on. I was still cold, but we played. And it's like, they couldn't tell you if they won or lost,
Yeah.
but it was like everything that was around that. And so those kinds of moments were really, really cool. To be able to have story and share story with the team about those types of things is pretty neat.
Yeah,
So,
we have a lot of those stories. Like back in the day, we took buses everywhere, and the broken down bus on the side of the interstate. And I have another one like yours of it being, we were up in Delaware, and they had a nor'easter, which I know nothing about, and it was sideways, hurricane, sleeting, wind, and those girls, and the jumps were blowing over, and the arenas were blowing over, and they were, you know, of course I'm a diehard. I'm like, y'all are going, you know, they're all like this, and you're like, no, we're going, we're doing it. But that is one of those funny things that you remember of, oh my gosh, that I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
You know, I think for us, having been been around for quite a while, I think that obviously our championships, I think the championship in 2005 that we won was really the first really organized championship that we did with equestrian, you know, and we all as coaches, we're the ones who are putting the whole thing on and organizing it, because it wasn't being, you know, we weren't a championship sport with the NCAA, and we didn't, at that point, we didn't have any schools that were in, that had conference championships. So I think, you know, winning that championship was great. But then I fast forward to the SEC adding equestrian as a championship sport to us was tremendous. And the being able to go into the first SEC championship, which was at Auburn, and I can tell you Auburn, Auburn is hard to beat at Auburn. And we were not, I think we might have, well, there were 4 of us, and I think we might have been the number 3 seed, maybe. Maybe we were number 4, I don't remember. But our girls were, you know, we're getting this done. And it was amazing. So to have won the first national championship and then to have won the first SEC championship for us was huge. And of course, you know, I mean, then you fast forward to 2015, which was within the, I think, we had this thing in the SEC. It's like, if you win the SEC, you're not going to win the national championship. And if you don't win in the SEC, then you're going to win the national championship. That didn't happen this year, but it's been kind of funny where it's like, okay, do we want to win the SEC championship or do we want to get, but it's kind of a joke, but I'm not sure. Auburn may have done it, but I'm not sure any of our schools have in the same year have won the SEC championship and the national championship. So it really does. It comes down to where you look at all the other sports that, on any given day, you can do. So, and I think the relationships, with the student athletes that you have and those ones that you keep up with, and, as people poo-poo or do whatever with Facebook, and I know most kids don't do Facebook anymore, but I love being able to keep up with a lot of these. I keep up with more of them through Facebook than I do through Instagram. And I really enjoy that. Actually, I spoke to one that was in my initial group of student athletes. It's from California a couple of days ago. That she has a client that's coming up that she wanted to know what do I need to do to help her get into equestrian program in college. So it's really neat to see the evolution of the student athlete after they leave. Some of them never get on a horse again, and some of them do turn professional. Some of them stay amateurs and keep horses, and so it really is a neat experience. And I had one that when you think about student athletes, and this one was basically she jumped mostly. She did not do the flat, which is where they do a pattern without jumping. But we did put her in on occasion because she was pretty talented. She hated it and would verbally pronounce how much she hated it. And several years ago, she's been graduated for quite a while, but several years ago, she sent me an email and just said, I just want you to know that I really appreciate you teaching me all that stuff you did and making me ride on the flat. She won some big national thing, and part of it was her having to do some stuff without jumping. And she said, if you hadn't made me do that, I never would have won this, this competition. So to me, that was so gratifying to have a student athlete who really wasn't even into it that much, but to realize the benefit of what riding in college, just like beach volleyball. It's not just about riding and us being mean to them or what, I hate to say mean, but where you're going, you have to do this or you got to do that, but it's just them learning the discipline. And I think that they learn a lot about life being on a equestrian, whether it's equestrian or volleyball. They're not many teams in high school with equestrian. Right. So they really learn about being on a team when they become part of a collegiate team. So it's pretty cool.
I think we saw something very similar, and I think that might have in some ways surpassed, making it into the tournament at any one point. But this last year, we had scheduled an alumni event during COVID. We'd never done anything. We'd had people kind of coming back and forth, and we had scheduled something during COVID. And we're getting ready, it's a couple weekends away, and then we get shut down. Everything goes away. So, steal your word, fast forward, we hosted our first alumni event, and it was in our 10th year. And we're only 10 years old. We had over between 25 and 30 people, graduates, alumni that came back and from that period of time. And we have this picture with, all the athletes and not only that, but to see all of them and how they continue to keep up with each other, continue to gravitate around each other. And then you kind of think, well, we had those 30 kids. Most of them had their parents with them too. Yeah. And so we got this giant group of people that have this is what it's about. This is the foundation of what we're doing. Right. So that was a lot of fun. Absolutely.
It is neat, that whole thing, when you see what the kids have done after college. And again, there's so many that are still best friends with each other. I know my associate head coach, Kristen Terbisi, is about to get married in December, and I think she's having a very small wedding, but I think her maid or matron, I'm not sure which one it is, but they're both related to either the team or the athletics department, which is pretty cool. So they never go, the friendships never go away.
No.
It's cool.
That's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, Moritz, has been great. I've loved sitting down with you. Actually, I've learned a lot about, even though we share a pod over in the Rice, I've learned a lot about beach volleyball and how you guys got started. And this has been a lot of fun sitting here and sharing stories. And it's funny how they parallel. Mm-hmm. So many of them parallel each other.
Well, and I think for me, I think one of the neat things coming up through this athletic department is that I've been able to lean on people like you who have been not just in this athletic department, but in this community and starting sports. Mm-hmm. And I've said it kind of out in the community before, like, this was my first head coaching job.
Mine too.
And to have the people around us to help kind of build us up and to help us navigate this thing has been tremendous. So it's been a lot of fun, learning more about it.
The support, I think the support has been, I agree with you. And evolution-wise, having been here for quite a while, it's amazing to see how much, the support has progressed. And I think it's as good as it gets. So I'm thrilled to be a part of USC and all of this, and hope we have many more years of this.
And successful seasons.
That's right. Oh yeah, and by the way, good luck.
Good luck to you too.
Thank you.